Okay, so to recap, what we did now is we basically got the pick guard installed. We got the pickups installed, the knobs installed, we did the wiring, and we mounted everything in the guitar, which basically brings us to the next level. The next level, we're going to be concentrating on the fretboard, and we're going to be focusing on getting it ready and making sure that everything is set up properly on the fretboard so that we can install the strings. The last thing I want to do before we get to that is just to lower that pickup that we raised up to get the pick guard installed. So I'm just going to lower that down a little bit to get it out of the way, because eventually when we put in the strings, that pickup will be too high and will be interfering. And we will adjust the pickups eventually when we get to that point. Right now we just want to get it out of the way. Okay. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to switch the focal point of the camera so that you can focus on the neck on the other side. So give me a couple of seconds to fix that up, and I'll be right back. Alright, so now we're going to be looking at the fretboard of this guitar. And as I mentioned earlier, since this is in an OEM neck, it was a Mighty Mite neck that I purchased off eBay. Now, we can't assume that everything is working properly on the neck. A lot of times the necks are set up properly, but sometimes you will find a neck that might have a high fret. It might need some work in terms of the truss rod, might need some polishing, some crowning, and some finishing of the edges. Overall, this neck seems to be quite good, but I'll take you through the steps and explain what I normally like to do, just to verify that everything is indeed correct and we don't need any kind of fret leveling or any other drastic measures. So what I normally start off with is to verify that all the frets are at the proper height and we don't have any high frets. To be able to do that, you need some sort of a straight edge to be able to see whether or not there is any discrepancy there. You can buy fret rockers, and what fret rockers are basically straight edges of various sizes that you can place on the frets and see whether or not you have any movement there. They're pretty expensive, and I found that you don't really need to buy those. You can make your own, and that's what I did. I went to the hardware store. I got myself an aluminum ruler, and I basically cut off different sections of different sizes to be able to get something that looks like this. It's a series of gradually shorter pieces of aluminum, and as long as the edge is straight, you shouldn't have any issues. And I'll show you how these work. Basically what you want to do is you want to take the longest one first, and if you cut them, you want to make sure that you can cover the length of 3 frets and not longer than that. You don't want a 4th fret to be at the bottom of the rocker, because what's going to happen is what you ideally want to do is you want to place the straight edge along the 3 frets and then rock back and forth. And basically you don't want to have any rocking motion. In this case, I can see that there is some slight rocking motion on the 2nd fret right here. So that's a high fret. Okay? I can see, especially on this side. I don't know if you can hear that. You see that? Okay, that's what you don't want to have. So what I'll do is I'll take a Sharpie marker and I'll just mark that particular fret as being high. Just put a little line across it, and I'll move on to the next fret here. This one seems good. Now, this one seems to have a little issue towards the edge here, so I'll mark that one and I'll move on, and I'll do the whole neck like this. I'll take some time, take various samples throughout the neck. See, this is another high one here. There's not a lot of difference in terms of height, but if there's any kind of rocking motion, that could signal a problem. And then you'll have buzzing on some frets at the end when you're finished the installation, and you don't want that. So once the whole neck has been verified like this, then you've basically identified all the high spots, or the problem frets, and you can go ahead and fix them, and I'll show you how to do that next. So now that we've identified some problems here, some issues, what we're going to want to do is we're going to try to fix them. And I've also noticed that the first and second frets seem to have some indentations here from playing. So basically that will happen sometimes. You use up this part of the frets, the first section of the frets, maybe a little quicker. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to file those down and get them adjusted properly. We don't need an entire fret leveling here. I don't think it's necessary because most of the frets are good. There's only some small sections that I think we can actually get to the proper height without going too crazy. Okay. What we're going to need though is something like this. Let me just show you what this is. This is a fret file. Typically it's a file that has no any kind of teeth on the front edge here, just on the top and bottom section here. And there's a little rounded file with some teeth on either side. Normally they're different widths, so you have for thinner frets and for thicker frets on the other side. You want to get a good quality file. There's a lot of ugly, cheap quality knockoffs that are floating around the internet which are not very good because they're going to leave chatter on your frets, and you don't want that. Chatter is basically the ugly lines, the scratches that you're going to be left with after you file them down. So I'll show you how this works. Basically, you take the file, you take the thickness that's most appropriate, most close to what you have on your frets, and you start filing back and forth. You don't need very much pressure, and you want to go slow at this point. You don't want to overfile. And I'm going to zoom in with the camera here and see if I can get you a little closer to what's going on with the frets. Alright, so we're ready to go ahead and start filing down a couple of these frets here. So I'm going to take the file, as I mentioned earlier, and we're going to be, let me just get the lighting a little bit closer here so we can see what we're doing. Alright, so we're going to take this file and start filing down the fret. And what you want to do is you want to have even motion across the entire surface of the fret. And you're going to see scratches, which is normal. And I'll show you how to polish those out afterwards. Once you see that the little indentations are disappearing, you want to stop. You don't want to go too far with this. I'm going to do the next fret as well. This is the fret that I found to be a little bit too high. And I was getting some rocking motion. So I'm going to want to just take some off the top here. And it was really only one section of the fret. It wasn't the entire fret. So I'm going to concentrate on the back of that fret. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of those straight edges that I had earlier, and I'm going to try it again to make sure that I'm not getting the rocking that I was getting before. And I'm still Actually, I need a little bit of a longer one here. Yeah, I'm still getting some rocking, so I'm going to keep going until that rocking kind of disappears. And take some samples quite frequently to be able to stop at the right height. We're almost there. So it's really just the back edge of this fret here that seems to be a little bit high. And it's a long process, but it's going to save you a lot of headaches if you get the frets adjusted properly. There we go. See, we're there. We're there now. There. So that rocking is completely gone. Now we're going to move over to this guy. This guy has the same situation. So we're going to take a little bit off the edge of this one. And you don't have to be afraid, because as long as you go slowly, there's not too much risk. There we go. And that one's gone. So we knocked off just enough there. And then finally, there's a fret right over here that we marked that we want to also make sure. You see that rocking? Actually, I have to take the smaller ruler. Yeah. This one's a little high towards the leftmost center portion of that fret. We're just going to lightly file off a little bit and then try again. Pretty good. Yep. And you want to also sample the frets right before and right after again to make sure that, you know, we didn't go too far. So now that's all we really needed to do with the frets here. So let's go back to the first frets that we had here. Okay, and now that we basically sanded it off, it's very rough, right? So we're going to have to put the polish back onto these frets and get rid of all those scratches. So typically what I do is I use a little bit of steel wool. And the type of steel wool you're going to want to use is 000 grade wool, which is basically very, very thin. It's probably the thinnest type of steel wool you can find, I believe. And you're just going to want a small piece of steel wool. You don't need a lot. Just a little piece of steel wool. This is 000 steel wool here. And what you're going to want to do, again, is just rub the fret and try to knock off some of that chatter that was left behind. Okay. Now, if you find that you really have to sand a lot and you want to protect your fretboard at that point, and what I do is I'll just use some masking tape. This type of tape that you use when you paint will do fine. And I'll just put some down on either side of that fret. Just to be able to protect the fretboard and allow you to file down whatever you need without having to worry about the wood. Because you don't want to get sanding marks on the wood. So I'm just going to put it beside the frets that we've identified earlier. And you don't have to go crazy, but you want to be able to protect the fretboard there. So that you can work properly. Alright, so now that we have them protected, all we really need to do, is continue and just polish those frets as much as you can with the steel wool. A little elbow grease will go a long way. And you'll see that a lot of that chatter will come off, and you'll bring the shine back onto your frets. And if you find that there's too much chatter, you might want to opt for some fine sandpaper. But for this, the kind of work that we did here, it's not very extreme. So the steel wool should be able to do the job. But you want to obviously take off as much of that chatter as you can. You want the frets to feel totally smooth once you're finished. And if they're not, you're going to feel it when you're bending your frets. And it's a couple of steps in this process to do it right. And I'll show you that as we go. Alright, so here we go. It's coming out nicely. Sorry for moving in and out of the picture there, but the camera's zoomed in quite close here, so. Okay. There we go. And you want to feel this with your finger. Make sure that there's nothing funny that you can feel. And if there is, you want to work on it some more. If there is, you just keep working. There we go. And that's pretty good. Okay. The next step in the polishing process. So the next step, what you want to do is you just want to clean off some of the excess leftover shavings or a little bit of that steel wool. You want to have a nice clean surface to work with here. Then what I like to do is I like to use a product called Never Dull. Never Dull is basically it's wadding with some polish in it, and you can get this at your car center, and it works like magic, really. And I'll show you what it looks like. It's basically a wadding, and a can like this will last you forever because you only need a small amount. So you take a little piece, you just rip off a small piece inside of this. Just take that out. Make sure the cover is closed because it'll dry out. So put the cover back on, and then take a small wad of this stuff and just polish up your frets with it. And you'll see a lot of this black stuff come off your fret. And that's basically what makes your frets nice and shiny. See that? See that difference there? So you want to go through your frets, and if your frets are tarnished, you want to clean off all your frets. Don't worry about the fretboard so much because it's not gonna affect the fretboard, and we're gonna clean that afterwards. But what you want to do is go through every single fret. Let me just get it in the picture here. Some of them might need a little bit more, some might need a little less, depending on the condition of the fretboard. And again, it's a labor of love. It takes some time, but the results are worth it. Go through all the frets until you get to the bottom of your fretboard, and then we'll start off the next process here.